Well, ladies and gentlemen, here's the new and improved Sanjeev back today to teach us about point of care and the urgency of it in India and China and other places. And you might tell our newer friends the name of your old company.
So the old company was called POC Medical Systems, Point of Care Medical
You're big
Systems.
into this point of care thing.
I love it. I think it's something where we can make an impact worldwide, and that's why I've gotten into it.
Go on.
So I actually have a presentation which I wanted to share with you.
Okay.
How do I go about doing it?
Information you want to share, you will share. Let's see. Make co-host. Change role to now.
No, I can share screen.
Oh, you can. Okay, good. I'm still figuring this out. I have like 3 hours of Zoom videos I'm supposed to watch that I've never gotten around to.
So here it is.
Okay.
Uh, so point of care, there's a need for point of care. All of us, when we look at point of care, we think of the US and the need for point of care out here. But there's a different need when you look at emerging markets. It's not the same issue which we have in the US or the Western world. And I'll cover that. It's a short presentation. If you guys want, I can send this to you, Joe, and then you can
Sure.
follow it.
Okay. Here's how tired I am. I just went to reach for my coffee. Instead, I just put 2 fingers into the coffee. Go on. Don't mind me.
Here's some facts which we all need to know. There's about 7.8 billion people around the globe. This information is available on the net, WHO, etc. And about 10 million physicians worldwide. 80% of the physicians are in major cities, and 90% of the hospital and labs are in major cities. If you look at the rural community, right, which is about 45%, literally you have nothing out there. Right? And according to WHO, one physician per 1,000 people, but in reality, I think it's even less because they're not even counting the rural communities. If you got only 10 million physicians and you got 7.8 billion people, there's no way that it could be one physician per 1,000. It's got to be much, much less. So there's an issue. And then if you look at the world, there's about 60% of the population which is in the rural communities in the emerging markets. And about 16% of that lives in slums. So, you're talking, and if you look at Africa, it's about 75% of the African population lives in slums. 30% of the people live for under $2 per day. There are no hospitals, clinics, or doctors in these locations. Okay? So, what you require for hospitals and doctors, etc., to be located there is you require electricity, clean water, the infrastructure, which doesn't exist. So in smaller towns, you have some minimal amount. There may be electricity, but it's unreliable, and there's some people are willing to go there. But then when you look at the slums in the villages, nobody wants to go there, right? And so there's nothing there. Take an example of India. In rural India, there's about 700 million people living in about 630,000 villages. They earn less than $2 a day. 70% of the disabled live here. There's no or very little safe drinking water. 80% of the villages have no electricity or for less than 8 hours a day. And that's why you can't have hospitals there or labs there or doctors' offices. And the illiteracy rate is extremely high. In regards to, so the government has set up PHCs, public health centers, but most of these are not manned by anyone. Right? And doctors just go in there for a day and then go back once a week. So there's one PHC for every 30,000 people, and there's one doctor for each PHC. So you literally have, unlike what WHO says that you have one for 1,000, here you're looking at one doctor for essentially 30,000 people. So the situation is they've come up with mobile ways, mobile trucks and three-wheelers, which they take medicine to these rural communities. But again, that becomes hard because of the infrastructure, right? Because not just in India, it's in pretty much every part of these Asian and African countries. The current methods and the key thing is getting the right diagnosis. The current methods for diagnosis is what you see on the left side with the X-rays, ultrasounds, etc., and they don't exist. And the current lab methods are too cumbersome for these villages and rural communities. They take too long. These people have to, if they want to get diagnosis and they want to get treatment, they have to travel to the cities and the urban areas. And at $2 a day, they can't afford to, because even if they do, that means they're not doing the work in the farms, and they're not able to earn the wages. Or they are daily laborers in the slums who cannot get out and work. If they get out and work, then they cannot go and see the doctor. So literally, if they do, they really need to get the diagnostics done right away and the treatment started right away so that they can get back to their work. And as a result, they decide, well, forget about it. We're not going to go get our checkup done. We're not going to get our treatment done. And it ends up getting worse and worse. So essentially, the problem is the lack of rapid, low-cost tools where you can detect these diseases quickly and start the treatment. It takes 6 hours to 24 hours to get the results. And these people who may have traveled from a village to a city, they have to get back, and they're not able to get back for a couple of days. And then they have to wait to see the doctor, which may be a week away. So if they can get that information right then and there, the doctor can start them on a treatment right away. But the methods which are there are too cumbersome and too expensive for these people. So what is required is essentially something which can be done in less than 30 minutes. You can get high throughput so that you can see a lot of patients, and it's got to be low cost so that these people can have access to it. Right? And why I've got this picture on the right, you can see what in India they've started is these centers, common service centers, where you can have all sorts of things done there, including telemedicine services, which you see listed out there. So they go in there and they can access a doctor sitting somewhere else in a district hospital and get treatment started, but still they don't have the diagnostics. So, as Joe, you and I were talking, I'm into point of care. I believe that's the key which is required to be able to do fast diagnostics and be able to give information back to the patient and to the doctor within 30 minutes. And at my previous company, POC, we developed this and started another company, Oncos DX, where I'm doing exactly the same thing, but for larger disease applications. And it's low cost, high throughput, literally results in less than 30 minutes.
How far along are you so far?
So we have already done all these tests. It's a modification to what we had done at POC. We had some inconsistency issues at POC, and those are what we have taken care of.
I remember there was some financial issue that caused demise, but is all of this intellectual property the same as before?
No, these are new patents that are filed. There's about 6 patents that we have filed since then.
And is your critical path some type of clearance in America, or since we're going for India, China, we're looking at CFDA or other notified bodies?
No, we are actually looking to do it in the US. I've already talked to Dr. Rena Phillips, who's head of IVD at FDA, and she said that they could get this into a fast track at FDA, so that once we get the FDA approval, we can get, it's a 510K, over 510K, we can get this through a fast track in about 8 to 9 months, and we get a pre-sale license, so we can take it into India and China and get it introduced pretty quickly.
Who's working on your 510K? Team member?
We haven't yet started. You haven't yet started,
okay. Well, I know a guy and a gal, so.
Yeah, I'd love to connect with some of the folks, about that. So it would be about 6 to 9 months away before we get started on it.
Okay.
So right now we are still raising funds for the company. We have, this is not going to require as much funds as we required in the past. We're talking about $5.5 million, and we've had the product in the market.
Okay. You didn't really talk to that slide so much. I interrupted you.
No, that's so here. What I'm showing is a test which takes about 4 to 5 hours on a regular ELISA machine. We do that on the Topaz Biolab, and we can do this in about 30 minutes. And you're seeing the sensitivity is much better. You don't have the error bars. Same thing we've done with CA15 out here. And again, you see much lower error bars using our system. So it's showing you that, and this is a completely contained system as opposed to what is there in the labs today, which you saw in the previous slide. Right? There are multiple steps which have to be done manually. This is a completely automated system. We put in a few drops of blood and it does it from there by itself. So as an example, we'll take breast cancer, which is what I've done with POC, and we're going to be introducing it at ONCOS as well. There's about 1.6 billion women worldwide, and only 60 million are screened today because of the tool is mammography. In India, there's 250 million women, 7 million are screened. China, there's 350, and only 7.5 million are screened. The problem is most of these women live in rural communities or urban slums, and they can't afford to go and get themselves tested, and the equipment doesn't exist. So that's where if you can do this with a system like ours, you can do it at less than $5, that these people can get tested because the government is willing to fund that, at $5 as opposed to having to pay for mammograms about $200. So some of the testing that we had done at POC, you'll see out here we have an average of over 90% sensitivity and specificity. But here's the key thing. On the right, you can see it does the test and gives the results right then and there.
The dates surprised me. I thought you were still doing POC, your last company, at these earliest dates.
Yeah, so it's still point of care. right?
Yes.
But the test panel was studied at when we were doing POC medical system. Right? It's just an enhancement of that, right? What we are doing now at OnCourse. So what we have done is made the system better, easier to use, and uh, there was some consistency issues in the design where we used to get a lot-to-lot variation, and those are taken care of at this point. So you don't get variation from batch to batch on the instruments. So one of the studies that we did was we were looking at what is the cost savings. Where essentially, if you take breast cancer, generally these women coming in, they normally come in when they have some symptoms, right? And that's generally at stage 2 or 3 or 4. Before it's too late. If they come in at stage 2 or 3, first the diagnostic costs are high, the biopsy costs, the treatment costs are very, very high. And so if you can find it early enough, you can protect the women where you can start doing diagnosis at stage 1 and the cost of treatment goes down. And our analysis showed that the percentage reduction in cost is about 82% because you're doing early detection and it's a low cost detection too, plus the treatment cost is much lower. And hence you can decrease mortality and increase productivity of people as well. So this is what you find, as I said earlier, about 1 in 7 women dies of breast cancer in India, 1 in 8 in China. And in Africa, we don't even know because they never get tested for that. Or in the Middle East, they never get tested for it. So they don't know what they're dying of, as you know. And if you can do something about that with point of care, you can actually help these women. And women are the nucleus of the family in all these countries, right? And they hold the family together. They literally drive the family. And today they're among the most productive citizens in most of these countries. They're driving the economy in most of these places as well. So the benefits are obviously reduction in mortality, reduction in total healthcare costs by 60 to 80%, increase in productivity and reduction in poverty. Because if they're making $2 or $3 a day, now the cost is, cost of diagnostic is $100 and treatment is another couple of $100. They can't afford it. They have to take loans and get more and more into debt. And as a result, the poverty just keeps increasing. So really point of care as a whole, which is low cost, portable, could help these people dramatically. And that's, and that's what I wanted to talk about, is getting that message across. The need is very different in these countries. You can take the system to them, put it into the villages. It's completely, you can have it automated. A village person can run these systems, and through cloud connectivity, a physician sitting far away can look at that data and tell you what's going on and prescribe a treatment. So that's a little bit about it.
First thing that comes to mind, well, a couple of things. One is, it wouldn't happen to be the case that any of your diagnostics could help us on the current pandemic.
Well, so we haven't started working on it. Unfortunately,
the slides now so we can just see you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So we didn't, by the time I got OnCourse started, the pandemic was already here. Right? And there's too many people who have already jumped into it and they're doing things. But I think what we are developing is something where you can do multiple patient testing on this, that it may not be necessary for this pandemic, because by the time you get this into the market, it would be, there's enough tests already there. But there are going to be future issues which will come up. You've had the SARS, you've had H1N1, you've had this pandemic now, you've had HIV. We are planning to do collaborations in China and India and Africa so that people can start developing these tests in these areas as and when these diseases come up, rather than having to do it out here. And most of these diseases generally start in those parts of the world and then they travel across. And so if you can start developing the tests out there, and literally you can start making a difference pretty quickly.
I had conversations a few years ago with the group, a couple of weeks, where I asked basically about the economics about helping the third world, and how sure we want to work on global health, but there's no money in it, which is, of course, sad and ironic.
Well, so it's interesting. When we look at it from the standpoint of things that we make here, they're extremely expensive, right? But if you design it so that it is meant for those emerging markets, right? So that you can have it, you come up with a design which is low cost. Mm-hmm. Then you can actually start making money at the same time. And
love if some of the designers on the call right now raised their hand or said something, because I'm very interested in that. I mean, I don't say Rick, for example. I don't imagine that you think expensively, because those are the, I'm just going to put Rick on. Ding dong. Do I have to?
Rick is muted.
Yeah, unmute and start video. John Richard, good morning.
Hey, good morning.
Do you think expensively when you're designing stuff?
Expensively or extensively?
Expensively. Because, I mean, Sanjeev said, here everything is expensive. And, I mean, if I said, I need you to design something and it's got to cost $5, but it's got to do this, is that just out of the realm of the possible when we're thinking here in America?
Oh no, there's a couple of short stories behind that. One of them is
actually, it's a couple of stories that are short when told by someone other than John Richard Stockton.
No, I'm employing discipline here.
Go on.
When I was a young manufacturing engineer, which I did for 15 years before designing, I used to really look with some disapproval on cost reduction activities in manufacturing, because I thought, oh, we're just saving some money. But it was sometime later I realized that money saved does something that's nearly a miracle. And what that does is it takes things that would be expensive and puts them in the hands of more people who otherwise couldn't get them, either because they couldn't individually purchase them or because they had become too expensive for their government or insurance programs to be able to afford. And so I remember the first time I read about the Jaipur knee, it was like a revelation. To me, it was as cool as when I saw the first two rocket boosters returning to Earth and landing simultaneously. It was a seminal moment for me. When I saw people walking around with something that was, and getting 90% of what you need out of a lower leg replacement, or most of the leg replacement actually, since it includes the knee, they got 90% of everything they needed for a tiny, tiny fraction. which meant people who otherwise couldn't have afforded something NASA-like from America were able to actually live their lives. Medicine was doing what it was supposed to be doing. So I hope I condensed it enough, but I always think about that. I always think about that. I always want to give someone the option of something that they can afford, because what that means is that people who couldn't have afforded what we're inventing could now do it.
The altruism is well noted. It's just, we're talking about going from $100 to $1.50 in a lot of cases. And I think that's what's been so dispiriting to American entrepreneurs anyhow. Sanjeev, would you agree? Isn't that what you see?
Exactly. And that's why you look at, doing something like this, what we are doing here in point of care. We are talking about doing this for, under $5, right? You go about doing things the way it's been done for years and years, it's going to cost a lot more. Now you got to start thinking of that market rather than the US market, right? Where people can afford or the insurance is paying, etc. If you start looking at it from exactly like Rick said about those people, then you're going to design something where the costs are going to be lower. And then you also have to look at volumes, right? Again, the other thing is people look at only the US market, which is comparatively small. But if you look at the world market, right? You look at China, you look at India, you look at Africa as large markets. Now you get volumes, and you can reduce the cost even further because of volumes. And so we don't need to make something for $100 and then charge $5,000. I was talking to a guy who was making the skin graft out of pig skin for about $50. And you know what he was charging? $5,000. And I'm going, why the hell would you do that?
Right.
Are you in this for business, or are you there to help save lives?
You've answered your own
They'll
question.
make a profit. Nobody says they'll make a profit.
You heard of Pharma Bro, right?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, now that from my conversations in about coronavirus, I've been putting myself out there as having met some people I trust to find PPE reliably and reasonably priced. There's a lot of fakery out there. There's a lot of gouging. There's a lot of quick buck, and it's I was going to say sobering, but perhaps an equally appropriate adjective is human. It's just what we do. It's sad, but I used to teach religious studies to my kids when they were young, at church after school. And I told them, anytime there's a question in religious ed, the real answer is love. That's like one way to cheat on the test. Great, I'm teaching them to teach about, cheat on God. But the answer for everything is love. And I said, everywhere else, the answer is money. There's some monetary driven apparatus in politics, in business, in everything. And we all want to, we all have to support our families, but that's not quite enough. We want a little extra, don't we? I'm not about to solve the human condition on Friday MDG premium calls, but I don't know if other folks have commentary on that, but
at the end of the day, we have been very fortunate. We have got a lot, and I think it's time for us to start giving back to society. Right? And if we don't do it, as a society, how are we going to uplift others? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have been fortunate. My parents, my father used to live in a village, and he'd walk about 10 miles every day to go to school. It was
I
back in
just have
India.
to laugh to myself. When you tell a New Yorker you used to live in the village, you went to NYU and you know, had a backpack. I suspect your father's village was a little different.
It was very different. It's like the villages which I showed you in the presentation,
Hmm.
right? And so it's and he gave me a great line, right? Uh, and so the least I can do is do something back, which will give back to that society where we came from, right? And it's not just me. I think everyone at one time or another has lived or has known people who have come from that kind of background, and we can do something to help them. I think that's, to me, that's my calling, right? And that's why I got into point of care.
So tell me, what are your economics?
So the economics, interestingly, the instrument is going to cost us about $500 in large quantities, and we expect to sell it for about $1,500 to $2,000. The the
And
discs itself,
how many units do you plan to how big a market opportunity is this? I mean,
well,
I
the
don't.
market opportunity is huge. I mean, you're talking about,
Okay, fair enough. What are your projections to sell?
you're looking at in the next year, we already have orders from the Indian government for about 2,000 of these units and 1 million of these discs, right? And I've got the Chinese government and in Africa governments interested in the same thing. So I
How are you
can,
so well connected?
well, I've been traveling quite a bit, right? And with EOC and my previous companies, I met the chief ministers and governors of different states, mayors, etc., different cities, um, especially especially in Asia and Africa. Because what we are trying to do is going to make a difference there, and that's why I got connected with them. You're talking about the disc itself costing us about $10 to $15 to make it.
Mhm.
Sell it for about $30, and you're testing 5 patients or 6 patients on that. You know, even if the physician turns around and charges $50, it's less than $10 a patient, right? And we expect we can bring the cost down even more. Look at a DVD CD which you buy today. It costs less than $1, right?
Who's buying DVDs?
Nobody does, and so most of these companies are going under, right? So what they're trying to do is repurpose, and we have talked to them about repurposing and building these CDs for us. Right? Now you're talking about large quantities of these CDs being made for biological applications, for human testing. So they're changing their process to do this, and suddenly you can bring your cost down to between $1 to $5. Right now, it may cost us between $5 to $10. Let's say about $10. But ultimately, we should be able to drive the cost down for a CD to about $5.
Mm-hmm.
Once you bring that down to that, and we can sell it for 15, well, the cost of diagnostics has just come down to about $3 a patient, $3 to $4, right? From even the $10 which I was talking about. Today, you're going for a diagnostic here in the US, you're paying about $10 to $20 as your copay, and the insurance company is paying the rest of it. And you go to a place like India or China, they're paying about $300 out of pocket, 300 rupees out of pocket. Right? So if you can bring the cost down dramatically, it can help these people.
Two things. One is, Lee, I just invited you to turn on your camera because while your point of care work is decidedly different than Sanjeev's, I thought you would have a perspective on what he's doing, especially given your work with X Prize. You appeared and then you vanished again.
I just wanted to get a real background. Okay.
No.
I have reappeared.
And then before you talk, Luke has something to say, and he says, please don't show me on the video. I'm in a hammock in the south of France, which I think begs the question, why can't we see you in the hammock? So just because this is the kind of guy, am I going to completely disregard what he said and promote him to show his camera? So that's what will be happening in the background while you're offering your perspective. So a lot of the X Prize work I'm given to understand is for global good, and therefore can't be American economics. Do you have some perspectives that are, I imagine, quite relevant to today's conversation?
Well, I'm probably bits and pieces, but I'm also wanted to let you know I have a conflict that so I'm going to be hopping off pretty soon.
Okay, then talk fast, damn it.
Thank you. I think when I hear about the CDs and so forth, we're really talking about the concept of decommodification. So much of what we've been doing in this world is creating commodification. And what you're talking about doing is, as we move into more things that are digital and move into more things outside of the United States, we like to operate under the motto, which is, if you want to make $1 billion, go help 1 billion people. So your concept about doing things out of the United States makes a great deal of sense to us. Our model is really looking to work in rural America and work in developing countries, and to stay out of the existing healthcare system. Because what we really find we're dealing with here is, it's not really a healthcare system; it's a sick care system.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so the answer is yes and yes. But we've had some experiments that have proved really successful. One of the other former trustees is somebody who's got a lot of publicity lately, Elon Musk. Elon just gave us a bunch of money, and eight figures, and we ran a competition on global learning. And what this competition was is, we took Android pads, which were donated to us by another former trustee, Larry Page. They gave us 3,000 pads, and we put them into rural communities in a certain place in the world, all hooked up to solar chargers. And we left. We watched it for purposes to make sure nobody gamed the competition. The competition was, could software be invented that would cause children to be able to learn how to read and do math at a 4th grade level with no adult intervention? So we went to the most illiterate place in the world that we could find, found 162 different villages.
There was place there for a great joke, but go on.
Okay. To different villages. We also required that all competitors had to open source their software. So and what we found is that there were 5 separate companies that came up with software that permitted children to learn how to read and write at a 4th grade level with no adult supervision. Nobody taught them how to use the devices. But the energy was there through the solar chargers. That's a pretty radical breakthrough for the benefit of humanity at the lowest possible cost you can imagine. Mm-hmm. So I don't know whether that's specifically relevant, Joe, to what you asked for, but I thought that it was very relevant as Sanjeev was talking about.
What I think is particularly interesting is, I kind of smiled to myself, and I know you didn't do this, but there was like some name dropping in there. Just because
I did that on purpose.
Okay, fair enough. But each of those names has untold wealth and humanity. And most of the people on this call, myself included, don't have untold wealth And we may have altruistic hearts, but we can't devote our livelihoods to pursuing those things. So do you think that, most, and in your experience traveling in those circles, do you think that most of the types of innovations that are needed for a global audience come from the philanthropists? A real business model for the rest of us?
Yeah, well, of course. Look, we're sitting in a moment in time, especially with this COVID thing going on. But we're sitting in a moment in time where all of humanity's no matter what your expertise is around the planet, set for the first time in history, 7 billion people all have the same goal to accomplish the same thing, which is the eradication of this. So the amount of innovation that you're going to start to see in whether it's biotech, devices, communication systems, both how we're doing our lives, this innovation is coming from everywhere. And the answer to your question is, it's not so much about the altruism, but like we say, if you want to make $1 billion, go help 1 billion people. And lots of these ideas originated, and many of these people, they themselves fall into this class of immigrant who got to the United States and made great fortunes, but all starting with nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't throw names of people and inherited anything. I threw names of people who came up with an idea and turned that idea into value. And that's what we're really doing. We're manifesting ideas and turning them into value. Joe, whether it's the keyboard that you're typing on or the monitor you're looking at or the chair you're sitting on, every one of those things started off as an idea. That's all it was. It was an idea that became manifested. Even the hammock that is in my lower right-hand corner.
Let's go tell us about that hammock later on.
Okay, so anyway, I've been taking up too much time. So
No, not at all. You're delightful. I know you have to jump off quickly, but Sanjeev, do you have a comment? Because
I think
it is so different, I think.
No, what you're saying makes complete sense. I mean, you look at worldwide, going out, reaching out to 1 billion people, you can make the money. It's not that you can't make the money. You're absolutely right. So you can drive your cost down. I mean, if you look at the retail industry, Walmart did that, right? Low cost to people. And so literally, as you increase volumes, you can decrease the cost. And you don't have to, and there are investors who are willing to invest in much lower cost and lower profits. They don't require that you have to get a 10x return, right? They're okay with even 3x returns. So I don't think it is just the Gates Foundation or these philanthropy places that you have to go for funding. The venture capitalists, the ultra high net worth individuals, and there are even your friends and family who are willing to invest in things like this. You just have to start thinking about designs from that perspective and finding the right partners to work with. And you can come up with that.
Lee, thanks for chiming in. And before you go, those are great glasses.
Thank you.
Very stylish. Let's talk soon.
Thank you. Be well, everybody. Thank you very much.
And
thank you for the great.
Oops. Well, I was a little hasty on the draw there. He was going to say, thank you for being a great host. And I appreciate that. That was very nice. Come on, Luke, unmute yourself. Let's hear the sounds of the winds and the birds in the south of France.
I guess you just put me online to ask my own question.
Yes, I did, but also I wanted to see hammock life in the south of France.
Oh, those are my tents. We're near a little river,
Mhm.
and it's great here.
You know, I've never been to the south of France. I've just, ugly
Even
American. I made it to Paris. I said I did France and I went home.
I think most of us do that.
It's so totally different over here. We were planning a trip to Barcelona, but we postponed it because the COVID outbreak there is rising again.
So you had a question of great.
Yeah, I have a question. Like with my company, designing a relatively cheap device, low cost, relatively high quality, that's a challenge we can accept. But for a company like ours, trying to market it and to distribute it and to support it in a third world country, that would be a major challenge. It's way out of our comfort zone. And I want to ask Sanjeev if he has some comments on that. Marketing, distribution, and support.
I think that's the thing which, if we can get people to help with design, what is important is getting to the right people as far as marketing is concerned. If you just go to, to the commercial guys, be it in Africa or China or India, it doesn't matter where, they're all in there for profit. But you go to the healthcare, the non-profit organizations, you go to the government, all of them are looking at reducing cost and getting it in front of the larger masses. They're willing to spend the money. And you can, so literally finding the right person to get in front of the healthcare ministries or getting in front of the non-profit organization. For example, in India, there's over, I think 200 NGOs. You get in and these guys are going into villages and rural communities and slums and so they're buying equipment for that. They're buying tools for that, right? So and they're looking at lower cost. So you can sell to them. It's not that you have to go and sell to the large diagnostic chains or the large hospitals. You can enable these guys to start providing the tests and the
So you have to set up, Sanjeev, you have to set up a local marketing to your own NGOs?
No, there are NGOs there. You just partner with local people who are connected to these NGOs. And that's what we've done. I've got to know these NGOs and I go to them directly.
Okay, and then we sell about 100,000 of these low-cost devices. And then we have to do support?
No, that's why you get a local distributor who's got a similar philosophy as you, right? And that's what we did in India and in China. We've got partners who have got the same philosophy as us, right? Looking at low cost, you have to have the same vision. You don't want to get someone who's got a completely different vision from you, because they're in there to make 10x on what you're providing. So let's say you make it for $100 and you sell it to them for $200, and now they turn around and charge 10x on that. You've just lost what you were trying to do, right? So you need to get the right partner who's willing to do that. And there are a lot of them all over the world.
And how do you find them?
Well, that's something through your connections. I mean, I've got connections in these countries, and that's how I've found them. So, and I can connect you to a lot of them if you're interested.
It was a hypothetical question. We make very expensive equipment for a few customers.
I see.
But we would be able to make a really good, because we have the knowledge how to make a good medical electrical device. So I think we could make a cheap one too, a low cost one.
I mean, if you can, there's definitely the markets, and I can connect you with all these people.
Okay, I'll keep it in mind. Thank you very much.
I think it's interesting that Jan chose as kind of floral outdoor background as she could. Because
my backyard.
Is that your backyard?
Yeah, it's in my backyard, or was. Now it's sort of burned away.
Not exactly south of France. I'm a little bored with it, but So you left a comment here. What were you sharing?
Oh, I was just saying when I came out of consumer goods and went into medical devices, and I was amazed that they did not even know how much, a square foot of warehouse space cost. All they were interested in was, getting something out to market fast. Don't worry about the cost. I mean, there's been times I've been able to reduce packaging costs by $5 to $10 a unit, and they say, no, it's not worth it. Because a lot of it has to do with what he was talking about before, how you find the right people to sell the stuff so they don't come back and say, oh, you've done something wrong, I'm not telling you what it is, but you still have to pay for it, basically, and reimburse everybody. So it's been amazing to me that they don't run it more like consumer goods. I was always told, here is the price point, here's what you can have for packaging, and do it. And in medical devices, they just say, we've got this, and figure out how to put it into something, and don't worry about the cost, basically, which I find appalling. But that's the way they tend to do it.
Speaking of consumer, next week, I asked a non-premium person to present with me. Carrie is going to talk about how she sold $1 million worth of medical devices direct to consumer. And when I first met her and I looked at what she was, what she had online, I was like, yeah, I can't help this woman. This is just too small a thing. And then she's like, okay, because this is what I do. I was like, oh, well, then you got to teach me how the heck you did that, because I have a lot of folks come to me with an idea that seems niche and novel, and they knew someone who really needed this, so they made it. And can I help them sell it? And I'm going to be interested to see how she pulled that off. Maybe a lesson or two that we can apply. I invited Dwayne to show himself. He's our newest member, and as you likely know, I like to give folks a chance to introduce themselves. So, Mr. Mancini, the floor is yours.
Hey, everyone. This is Dwayne. I work for Covance in their medical device unit. So I help clients with regulatory, reimbursement, health economics, quality management system, clinical trials.
How many employees does Covance have?
Covance itself is like 20,000. They're part of LabCorp, which is 60,000. But the medical device
acquisition, do you know?
I know
you're relatively new there, but when was that acquisition? Last 2 years or so?
Yeah, I think 2 or 3 years ago. Covance has acquired quite a bit of companies itself as well before that, but the medical device team's like 155 people. So we are a rounding error in the grand scheme of things. So I manage the Southeast territory there, and on the side, I also run a podcast that's how I interviewed Joe yesterday.
That was the best one so far, right?
Of course, obviously.
The other guys aren't going to be watching this. You can let everyone know I was the
best. Yeah. I mean, you were definitely the most honest, which I appreciated. I think sometimes
occupational hazard.
Yeah. Sometimes people get on the podcast and almost put on an act, and you can't get a real sense for who they are. And it's an issue sometimes. But yeah, I'm a chemist by training, so my background is really in, from a technical standpoint, in the biocompatibility of medical devices and that sort of thing. But help clients in all areas. Work with a lot of startups.
And first, welcome. And what do you suspect folks of various backgrounds here in our loving Friday family might be able to help you with?
Everything. It's I've learned a lot today just by listening to this. I was maybe 10 minutes late, but
that was the good part. That was where we really concentrated all of the knowledge. We let Sanjeev ramble after
that. I caught the end of his presentation, but
send me the slides. We'll get that to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, just learning in general. I'm kind of walking into this world and learning a lot about different aspects of it. You know, I'm a scientist that's trying to figure out everything else now. So, yeah,
All
I
right.
kind of learn a lot. I don't really have anything specific.
I didn't ask you to have anything specific, just a chance to say hi to everybody.
Yeah.
And I notice a lot of names I can't pronounce among our attendees today. I can't help but wonder if they are friends of yours, Sanjeev. And if they are, they're welcome to raise their hand or say hi or ask a question or give you an attaboy or whatever else. There are no other pressing questions in queue right now. Sanjeev, is there anything you'd like to sign off with? Kind of a
Also,
main takeaway?
sure. One of the things that I'd like to say is, this there's a massive need for something like this, and there's no way one company can do it. And there's a lot of point of cares which are coming out there. But having said that, most people and the venture community is all focused on, if you're doing point of care for these emerging markets, they don't really care to know about it. They're not investing in that. But if you're doing point of care in the US, they're excited about it because obviously they're looking for a 10x return on investment. But I would encourage people to look at point of care for these emerging markets because the need is huge. You don't really need, and I think the venture community needs to be educated also on the need outside the US. Like they're literally focused on this part of the globe and nowhere else. But there's still a business to be made. If you get your manufacturing done outside the country, and you can still bring the same product here and help drive the healthcare costs down even in the States. Why should it be that expensive here? There's no reason.
I'll remind folks, many of whom might not have joined us back then. Back on April 24th, Sanjeev was our guest. He talked about why we should look at India for research, manufacturing, and commercialization. So that's on our channel. All of the sessions have been archived, so you might be able to catch that. Besides 510K, which you said is some months out, what other core functions do you presently have a need for? Perhaps someone on the call can be helpful for you in some capacity.
Well, I mean, obviously, if someone can help us with fundraising, that would be great.
Everyone likes money. You said you needed about 5 million. How far have you gotten in that quest?
Well, so far we've just started the process. So we've internally we have been putting in money. The founders, 3 of us, have put in money, but we are looking. We've raised about 100,000 so far. Having said that, a lot of the work was initially done at POC, and there we had spent about 30 million at that time. So a lot of that work is being enhanced from there, right?
It's interesting to me, though, because you say you're working off of 6 different patents. Right. So there's no crossover from the intellectual property of POC?
Except there was a license that POC had from Lawrence Livermore, which went back to them, and we licensed that back. That's an additional 2 patents. So that's the crossover.
Okay.
Otherwise, the designs are quite, well, they're enhanced from what POC's design was.
Okay, so regulatory, fundraising, anything else you need at this point?
I think there will be distribution partners that we require in the States. Mm-hmm. That would be obvious. Mm-hmm. Outside the US, well, taking Asia and Africa, I think I'm pretty well covered in those places, but in US and Europe, I'd be requiring partners to distribute the product.
As a service for you and everyone on the call, Dwayne just wrote and says he has a list of 500 investors in medtech, and he can make an introduction to a few of them specifically.
Oh, I love that.
Look at that. Look at our little family. Everyone's coming together. I don't think I can end on a better note than that. So I need a shave. And next week, we're going to talk about marketing direct to consumer, followed by clinical trials. Peter's going to talk to us about obesity surgery. Luke is going to get out of his hammock and tell us 10 really bad things about IEC 60601. And we're full through mid-September, but I have an opening the last week of August. If somebody's got something really good to share, send me a note and we'll make it so. Always a pleasure. And you may not be in the hot seat, but now that I know that you're doing your 7 to 10 mile walk every day, I'm going to be looking at your size every week. Incredible shrinking Saxena. Is that the way to pronounce your last name?
Right, Saxena.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Have a
Thank
great
you.
week, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.